Well, just honored to be here. Thank you for the weaving. Ian, thank you for the meal and the organizing. Just all your energy. I've known Ian for so many years. Organizing alongside, helping to make places more walkable, safe for pedestrians, people who move on wheelchairs, transit, all the things. So it's just a gift to be in your space, brother. Thank you for having me. So I could talk so much about all the things, and I'm going to try and condense it to I want to read from the book a couple times, if you're open to a couple stories. But before I do, I'll just give a little bit of background. And I love kids, so I love it. So don't even worry. Yeah. So really?
Wait. Say,
Upper left-hand corner window there, hit the green dot to maximize.
yeah,
Can you hear me okay?
Monica,
Monica,
yes,
can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure you can hear me.
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, and if I can yell and get really loud, so feel free to move your microphone if you need to. I'm just moving you closer, just to make sure.
Yeah, this is fine.
Great.
Ah,
So I consider myself a walking artist. So I'm just going to offer a little bit of background on my work and my life, and just to give some context. I've always been an artist. Fine art, you'll see the book that I'm holding here is mixed. It's a creative nonfiction, and it has a lot of my pen and ink artwork. So I do a lot of pen and ink work as a way of just expressing life and stuff and things. So I've been doing that most of my life. I've always been an artist. I moved every year to 2 years. I was sharing this at our table earlier growing up. So I went to 14 different schools before the age of 16. A lot. And it was tricky. It was hard in its own ways, but it also had its blessings and its gifts. I'm also gay queer, so coming out for me was a really tricky process. It was difficult for me. There were a lot of things growing up that were heavy and hard, and I am a master suppressor, so I just bury things. I put them in my stomach, I put them in my hip. I don't even know where I put it, but I bury it somewhere. And I got really good at burying things, because when you move every year or 2 years, and you're a new student every year or 2 years, you just blending in, not being the reason there's conflict. My parents split when I was 6. It was an ugly divorce. So there was lots of chaos, hard things. And so when I got into my early mid-20s, this was a ticking time bomb. I mean, things were just gonna, at some point, it was gonna blow, and I knew it. Like, this is not gonna be good. I stumbled across a book called Walk Across America by Peter Jenkins. I don't know if any of you have heard of this book. It was an amazing book from someone who walked across the country in the 70s. When I was at college, it was 20 cents. And I picked up that book for 20 cents. I skipped all my classes in those 2 days and read this whole thing. And I was a mess. I was a mess because this was something that felt like, okay, this might be the thing that will help me recalibrate, like how I connect to the things that are actually going on the inside, to connect with other people, since I had moved every 2 years and I mostly was shuttled around in a car. So I saw all these places through the windshield of a car and felt just disconnected from everything and everyone. So a little that was some of the soil behind in 2010, taking off and walking for 8.5 months across the country. I had no idea what I was doing. So for those of you that are hikers and backpackers, my backpack weighed 95 pounds. 95 pounds. Jonathan, you don't know what you're doing. 95. So you can imagine a couple weeks into it, like that was reduced. Hey. Yeah, I know. A couple days for real. Yeah, there was a lot. But it was, I mean, I was so eager to learn and to recalibrate everything. I was 26. And so I had my Blue Heeler Husky with me, which was just my peer, my friend, permission to do hard things. My dog Kanoa passed 2 days before this book was released, which was this last August. So that, what a unique moment when he's just like, you got this, man. So I want to get into some of the stories in here, but I just want to comb a couple things really quick. That walk was transformative at every level. Connecting with hundreds and hundreds of people across different ages, paces, abilities, race, background, politics, social, I mean, you name it, moving through towns and cities. And I was mostly on small highways and roads, so it wasn't on a trail most of the time. So I am seeing and feeling these connections to towns and community in ways that I'm absorbing for hours and hours and hours at an unhurried pace. And so it was teaching me things in all the ways, teaching me about connection to my own thoughts and emotions as I'm walking. For those of you that may have a background in neuroscience, I talk a little bit about in this book related to the benefits of walking, related to what happens in the brain. There's a great neuroscientist, Shane O'Mara, who has a book called In Praise of Walking, which is I highly recommend. But it breaks down just after 20 minutes of walking or moving in an unhurried way if you're on a wheelchair. You are actively creating new neural pathways. Like 20 minutes of moving in an unhurried way. And this can be other forms of exercise too, but walking is actually the most regulated. It doesn't demand as much, it doesn't block as much. And so he says in this book, and I lived this and experiment with this all the time, but if we are moving with it alongside complex social political issues, alongside conflict in relationship, alongside conflict in community, move with your people so we can be creating new neural pathways together around all the spaces between all the lines that have been drawn. And it's something that's, he's put words to things that I've experienced in my body for so many years, and it's been a gift to connect to his work. And so 8.5 months walking the country doing this work, experiencing the benefits of unhurried movement, the healing. One of the primary things was moving with other people. So I had hundreds of people join me for days, hours, weeks at a time, listening to their stories, kind of fumble out as we walk on a dirt road together, hearing from a lot of people. This is my first time ever walking through this part of town or this part of the city or whatever it is. People would join me for days. They do a couple hours and then they just hang on for a couple days because they found that things were coming up. If any of you have heard of a therapy treatment called EMDR, it's a really important therapy treatment that is focused, that was founded on someone, yes, he's doing right there. Scanning your environment left to right, naturally happens when you're moving in an unhurried way to just help release things that are just stuck. It's not a fix all, solve all, but it's medicine. It's really medicine. And so all of this was happening. I left, and I talk about it in here. There's a chapter called Walking as Rite of Passage, and I'm not going to read from it tonight, but I left the Delaware coast scared, afraid, carrying a lot of self-hatred, lots of just pain, lots of pain. And I could say in every vibration in my stomach that I do not have what it takes. Do not have what it takes to do hard things, to survive whatever's going on. And I want to try. And by the time I got to the high desert of Nevada, walking naked on Highway 50 for days, I was like, I have what it takes. This is to wake up to wild horses in the high desert without clothes. Sorry, that's the last time I'll mention that. It was like so freed up in the mind, in the heart, in the body, so freed up. And I finished on the California coast. My great uncle and family. I had 100 people join me on that final day to the coast in San Francisco. And I had no idea. Has anybody been to Black's Beach in San Francisco? is it Black's Beach, the clothing optional beach? Well, I had no idea there was a clothing optional beach in San Francisco, and my great Kansas uncle is in his Sunday best, walking through this amazing beach, tiptoeing over lots of people. It was an amazing finish. The last little note connected to this is, throughout this experience, connected to some of the things that we've heard and hear already related to pedestrian mobility and safety and access, the learning lab of experiencing what people go through on foot, on a wheelchair, on a powered scooter, waiting for the bus. One of the drawings that I'm handing out with the books is a drawing that I made of somebody carrying 6 bags of groceries without a shelter, without a bench, in the rain, in the mud, in snow, next to cars that often splash them in storm, holding the hands of children and medians, clenching their fists. That there are millions of people in our midst and our neighbors across the street around us that have no choice but to be walking, wheeling, taking transit. So if it's, I used to work in refugee resettlement. Legally can't drive, medically can't drive, physically can't drive, financially can't drive. And so the terror really of these environments was, I mean, I didn't study urban planning, I didn't study engineering, but this was a lived, heartbreaking, all the time I would sit next to and live with people, helping them in really compromising situations across the country. So this pedestrian mobility as a part of my creative work is just, it's an unquestionable outlet for dignity, the dignity of human people. So a lot of my work as a walking artist is the tension and the relationship between all the benefits. So whether, and by the way, I meant to start to say this earlier, none of my work is car shaming. This is not, no car shaming. That's not what this is. Like, gee, I love getting in a car when you go to my little tiny home in the mountains. Like, there are amazing things that the car has brought us, does for us, related to keeping us safe. Related to getting to places that inspire us, the art of car making, there's so many things, and the harm of something that has been so oppressive to A, so many people who have no choice, but B, the millions of us who have the option to drive and oppress it to our mental health and to our communal health and to our connection to water systems. To our connection to the sky and the trees and the birds and the things that are living in the spaces between, stumbling upon each other and realizing that our differences can find common ground because we bump into each other at a bus stop or in a plaza, or that we all can stop and just calm the mind because we have spaces where music can be more freely played, and that we're not just watching older adults, so many of them go into facilities separate from families, observing and listening to traffic all day long. Like thinking about public and low-income housing, listening and observing and risking their life every day to cross streets that aren't designed for their experience. So this is just all the way of saying this is, as an artist, I'm just experimenting around the benefits, the connection between each other, and the dignity of being a pedestrian in this time. And so one of the projects that I work on a lot with Ian and with others is called Pedestrian Dignity. So I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Y'all, I'm 40. And TikTok is a mess. This is not a pitch to get on TikTok. But after hosting so many events, I host a lot of events with engineers and planners, a lot of what you all were talking about, like hosting cross-agency, cross-resident events that center the story of what pedestrians go through with decision makers who impact systems. And let's get it into our body, let's feel this. So we can move our body brain and not just a conceptual brain. Let's feel it, let's sweat in it together. And so doing a lot of those events, a lot of the young people who come for years, or for about 6 months, not years, would say, you got to get on TikTok. I'm like, no. Easy answer, no. But thank you. And then they would ask me again and again and again, because I would do events with high school students and they just be like, you gotta get on TikTok, bro. Bestie. You work with kids, that's in one of the new terms. And so I tried it and I'm using this. You might see me out in the city. I was there all morning doing little videos, getting really close to the intersections. And I do these 30-second educational clips around behavior. Where are people going? Where are they coming from? What is this? How is this intersection or road supporting their dignity and their experience? And trying to educate and connect. And the thousands of messages I get from young people now who are taking their classmates out, taking their teachers out, calling their city council member for the first time. It's amazing. So as a civic engagement tool, you can start playing. Okay, I just read this before I just explain it. Are we okay if I read a couple stories?
Please.
Okay. So this is from chapter 1, and it's very intentional that this is chapter 1. There is some intention in the chapter setup throughout the whole thing, but I highly encourage in the preface to just jump around in the book. There may be a theme that you're like, not feeling that one, at least not right now. Then jump around. I just encourage people that the themes kind of hop all over the place, but there is a thread of intention from 1 to 12. So the very intentional first chapter is titled Walking as Human Dignity. And I have a drawing here, and I'm going to read the drawing before I go into the story. The dignity in me honors the dignity in you. The courage in me honors the courage in you. The truths in me honor the truths in you. The rage in me honors the rage in you. The pain in me honors the pain in you. The love in me honors the love in you. Shoulder to shoulder. Our arms are swinging and the landscape is slowly moving alongside of us. The Colorado air wraps itself around our cheeks, our breath, and our bodies. The sky is big and open. It feels good to be outside, away from the walls. Our walking group finds itself every Thursday around 10:30 a.m. in the sprawling and concrete-covered corners of Southeast Denver. International markets, large corporate office buildings, strip malls, spacious parking lots, service centers, and busy arterial streets cover the landscape. The women in this weekly walk are from Iraq. They are refugees, and they came to the United States just after the US-Iraq war and are mostly all over the age of 65. We walk, all 9 of us, side by side. Some of us right next to each other, some holding hands and others behind or in front. Humble glances and friendly smiles are exchanged. Some of the women bring their previous conversations into a moving dialogue, and some hardly talk at all, if ever. We seem to subconsciously agree that there's enough in the outside world keeping our attention and connection without words. Most of the women are Muslim and wear colorful or all black hijabs. A few of them are Christians with uncovered strawberry blonde hair. I love sharing breakfast together before going on the walks. We all sit around the table across all of our ideas and differences. Their culture, their language, their foods, and their traditions of home bring them together beyond their conflicting beliefs. Most of these families fought on the side of the United States during the US-Iraq war. Most of them have lost immediate loved ones in the war, sons, husbands, brothers, sisters, and cousins gone. Tears well up in their eyes and in mine every time it comes up on our walks. They are grateful to the United States for their role in the war. However, many of them miss the culture and roots of their homeland. They share with me that they are angry and sad for the state of their home country, and with gratitude are doing what they can to make it work here in the US. I will never forget 2 of the women coming up to me in early 2017 when our country had a ban on Iraqi refugees. They asked, "We are looking at places to go. We don't feel safe here in Colorado. We feel there are better states to live in. What do you think? Would Oregon be better for us? Please tell us, we'll move. Do you know people in Oregon?" I had no answers for them. Their words filled me with grief, felt like fire rising up in my chest. The unnecessary mistrust, disconnection, and devastation. when a country and culture feel threatened by those they don't understand. I so badly wished there were more people in our city living in relationship with these incredible women and their beautiful families to affirm that they are welcome here, right where they are, as they are. We're still walking. Without words, we are still listening and connecting to one another. Most of the time I carry a wide smile, but I'm silent. I can't speak Arabic, and you can only say, "How are you? What is new?" so many times when the answer is met with a humble grin and a squint. We end up connecting eagerly around everything else. I pick up sticks, point out plants, encourage stretch motions, offer up dance shuffles, and more. In some ways, it is refreshing to move beyond spoken forms of communication. We laugh and we move. Nature, along with one another's company, feels good and is always enough. After having guided so many group walking experiences, I have utmost trust for what takes place when the body starts to move in this way. The fluids, the cells, the neurons, and so much more are given permission to lead and to live. I always show up with a wooden walking stick. The women always ask me why I have it. "You are young," they say. "Why do you have this? To protect us from the dogs." They laugh and continue. They want to touch it and try it. They always find it to be an entertaining part of our journey together. In fact, as my hair grows longer past my shoulders, I'm now getting welcomed as Thor and Jesus by the women. Every time I walk into the adult daycare center, I feel blessed in that strange way to be a frequent target for a good late morning joke. The streets we walk are full of parking lots, wide roads, and tiny or non-existent sidewalks pushing us into traffic. It's no mystery why so many people give in to being sedentary and inside. We are all waiting and huddling at the fragile pedestrian island facing a high traffic intersection, awaiting our great crossing to the Cherry Creek. The cars rush past us 6 lanes deep in all directions. I often see the women lock elbows and stand close together as one body. We cross the street. And we're talking 8 lanes here. 8. This is not an interstate. It's frightening, but the rewards are worth it. We continue walking. The glow of the sun off the grasses is calming, no matter the season. Ducks and geese float along the creek, and the sound of the rushing water begins to compete with that of the traffic. I'll never forget one of our first group walks all the way down to the water. We were taking a break to enjoy the sun. As we rested, one of the women quietly tiptoed down to the cold creek. Mind you, everyone is 65 plus. So she's tipping down to the cold creek. She held a small paper cup with one hand and lifted her long skirt with the other. She kneeled and filled her small cup with the cold creek water. Having no care for her friend's dress and mall shoes, she came up from behind and began to pour water onto her head. Yeah. Oh. Everyone's attention quickly focused on the woman who was now wet with creek water. I was waiting for my first group fight or a good night. This was the first walk. She just dumps her friend. We waited. She busted out laughing. Thank everything. All of the women roared, and if it wasn't for some of her discomfort getting down the rocks, she would have surely returned the favor to her bold peer. We laughed the whole way back. The playfulness was magic. As the walks come to a close, words of gratitude in English and in Arabic move between us. The women smile and are grateful to rest. I've been told by the people we work with that this is one of the most valuable programs they've ever had. Walks like these profoundly change me from the inside out. It's a practice of giving oneself to what can be learned or gained through experience and not just ideas of the mind. Once this embodiment takes shape and begins to live within you, the mind often has no choice but to let go and to adapt. You move with, cry with, and laugh with the story and song of who you walk with. There is no turning back to what were only ideas. Because of this walk, I am forever connected to older women, to refugees from Iraq, to the US-Iraq war, to the many expressions living within Muslim life, and so much more in a way that I would have never imagined. No article or book or political lean would have educated me in this way. I'm no expert, but as I am sure, especially after all our walks, that the questions The mysteries, the relationships, and the spaces between what we deem as right and what we deem as wrong are more important than ever. Love those women. Oh my God. Thank you for listening to that story. It's just, it was such a gift. We did that walk for 4 years, every Thursday. So you can imagine all the laughing and dancing and throwing of water. Mostly because we just couldn't talk. We couldn't use a lot of language. So we just got creative. Throughout this book, I really care about practices. So there's smaller integration practices and larger, more dedicated practices. So right after this story, there's something called, and I'll just read it. It's only a small paragraph. I'm going to offer it. Integration practice, respect, and the second gaze. As you move, take several minutes to be with the root meaning of the word respect. To respect, to look again. When you are out moving and you see someone approaching, sitting on a bench, leaning against a front porch, or waiting in their car at the traffic light, honor their dignity by noticing and going beyond your first reaction. Honor the same invitation with plants, trees, and animals. Move into a practice of intentionally seeing for a second time and drawing out more curiosity, presence, and connection. So that's just an example of just some of the little, like, they're just tiny little, like, hey, maybe think a little bit else with you. As Ian shared, Walk to Connect is becoming a program of America Walks. And so the dedicated practice at the end of this chapter is just some tips that get a little more detailed on how to consider starting or leading your own connection-focused walking group that was hosted with these women, as an example. So thinking about moving with groups in an intentional way for connection, for health, for community, but also to help mobilize safer streets. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing with America Walks, just doing these leader trainings, as we call them, that help inspire and move leadership around collective community building, around all these things. Can I move into another story?
Sure, yes, please.
This is actually, this is more of a visualization. And so I'm going to read this one and then I'll do a smaller story at the end. We'll still have 2 more. So I invite you, this is a part of the chapter Walking as a Human Right. This is chapter 3. So I invite you to close your eyes if you want to, but if you fall asleep, it's cool. Let yourself go to sleep. The visualization, drenched and depleted. You are walking or moving in a wheelchair. You are en route to catch the only bus that goes to where your medical appointment is. It runs every hour and sometimes doesn't show up at all. You know the buses in the early morning are more reliable. It rained heavy last night and street medians, intersections, and paved over watersheds are flooded. You are dodging, skirting around, or having to go right through the water. You get splashed by rushing high-speed traffic. Because of the flooding, you have to go slower than usual. Your back hurts because you didn't sleep well. Your shoulders hurt because it's not good for you to carry all these groceries. Your glasses are fogged up and you can't wipe them. You're angry because you slipped and a can of soup went rolling into the gutter. Your mind is heavy because you are exhausted from the grind. Your heart aches because you never seem to get enough time with loved ones. Shit. You see the bus several blocks ahead. It's 10 minutes early. The no bench, no shelter bus stop is full of people waiting. You see them start to get on. You panic. Maybe you can make it if they take their time. Yelling won't help. You can't wave your hands. You pick up your pace, clench your bags, hold your pain, and try. There it goes. Everyone got on except you. You worked so hard to arrive early, too. You knew the weather would be bad. You knew you had to be quick at the door. The bus flies right by you, splashing you on the way out. You tried to wave your arms, make a scene, and ignite sympathy from the driver. Not today. Not on most days. Cars continue to rush past you. No one sees you. Time turns to heavy mud. You must stand for the next hour and wait for the next bus, if it comes. No bench, no shelter, drenched, depleted. You could rest in a nearby cafe, but you have to buy something. You can't sit in a patch of thorny grass because it's soaked and would hurt your knees. You also need to use the restroom. Where could you possibly go? Hold it in. You will be shamed and fined if you go in public. Keep it in. Just pausing for a moment to just the complexity that we all carry around things that we don't know because we haven't experienced them, things that we might have hints of because neighbors experience it, things that we might understand because of racism and classism related to some of the most dangerous roads with the most frequent bus routes. So the complexity of the spaces between these places of preventable indignity for so many people, but in so many ways, right, all of us, because of how good it is for us to be outside and with each other and moving with each other. So this is an example of a reading. So when I'm doing these walks, often I get into some spoken word and poetry, and I encourage that artists are a part of more civic engagement process to kind of bring in story and bring in. So I'll have engineers along and I'll read this under, I have to have a speaker because it gets so loud with these intersections. But I really try and invite some of this, like these examples into our events. There are other stories throughout the chapters from other people in my life who do amazing work or connect to walking or moving in an unhurried way. My dear friend Pam Jiner, her story comes next after this. If you haven't heard of Girl Trek is an amazing movement specifically for Black women. Their motto is saving lives, and it's all about moving in our bodies, moving in our streets for health, for connection, for dignity. She shares an amazing story of her organizing work. We've done a lot of events together in Denver. So there's some other perspectives that are kind of added in here. And the title again is Walking as a Human Right. Just the invitation that I have a right to move the way I need to. I have a right to feel safe in public space. I talk a lot about it's being a white man. It's a complicated, we all carry nuances. Being a woman, being a person of color, being someone who's more non-conforming LGBTQ, someone who's like children, old, like all these different identities and realities that we carry related to, do I feel safe? And so how does the built environment, a lot of what Ian's work, Walking College, this guy, y'all, if you don't know, has been training hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of advocates for so many years around all of this. So he is a national, international leader, very much, in training people to lean into systems change around this. So it's very much connected. Okay, can I read one more small story? Okay, please. The practices in that walking as a human right are connected to some ideas that you can take with you. So it's a great chapter for just planting seeds. Okay, this is a small story from the chapter Walking as Play. Beckoning the inner child. As soon as they were dropped off, and after a few strange looks, we started moving. Within minutes, they wanted to search for good walking sticks. I always had a walking stick with me, and they immediately wanted one too. Each of the boys, 1, 7, and 1, 9, eventually found one that worked for them. Their mom connected to our journey a couple of days prior and felt that it would be fun to have her boys join me for a few hours. I always loved moving with young people in big open spaces. I had several parents, several homeschoolers drop their kids off throughout my long walk. And the first one, I didn't get her phone number. You better believe after she drove off, because she had to run some errands, then I was like. Oh, God. I didn't get her phone number. I was not thinking about this. She straight up just dropped her kids off with me. Anyway, it was funny stuff, but several families. I remember always feeling awestruck and inspired by their level of trust. I learned quickly into my cross-country walk that nearly everyone, no matter the age, would eventually feel lighter and more themselves after a good 15 to 20 minutes of movement. As we moved, we talked about family, hobbies, and what excited each of them. The questions came rolling in. What does Kanoa mean? What does Kanoa eat? Does he like kids? Is he a wolf? Do you ever ride on his back? Did you ride on his back? Where does he sleep? Where do you sleep? How big are your feet? Where do you pee? What do you eat? Why do you walk so much? There was no shame in any question. Do you ever accidentally poop on your shoes? Epic, 7-year-old. Cracking. In less than an hour, we were singing, laughing, and stopping to explore everything that showed up along the road. We were alive. They climbed on hills. I would follow. Their eyes would widen at the sight of slowly moving beetles. So would mine. They examined an old rusty toy that was tossed out of a car window. I was curious with them. They yelled and sang, so I yelled and sang. They pretended their sticks were swords, so I did the same. Play and wonder spilled from their pores. It also started to spill from mine. What could I climb next? What could we explore together? We saw a snake slither away and watched it until we couldn't see it anymore. We stopped to look at flowers and bugs. We threw rocks at nearby fence posts. The first one to hit the post 3 times won. We had colorful and lengthy conversations with the cows and horses we passed along the way. We dug up dirt and took breaks under trees. I learned so much from these two. In just 2 hours, we found a way to connect and play beyond the world of cars, walls, screens, and rigid relationships to time. I was reminded of how dull adulting has become. Even as I worked to break free from so many molds on this walk, the 2 boys made it clear just how much I was still missing. There were and are so many opportunities around us to be in constant wonder and play. At the 2-hour mark, the youngest one was done. His face started to cave in and the moping began. It was time for Mom to pick them up. As she drove away, they held onto their sticks in the back seat while waving out the window, screaming, "Goodbye, Kanoa." Kanoa really was the star. So I just love the invitations in this chapter too. There's a lot of in the dedicated practice at the end, it's like inviting families with children on walks, bringing sidewalk chalk with you, earth naps. When can I take a good tree nap? Gifting and art, having things that you just hand out to people when you're out on a walk, like affirmation notes or anything, just something to kind of bring a smile. My dear friend Nicole does this so well. Everywhere we go, she's always got a bag of things that she spent maybe 20 minutes on writing these little affirmation notes, where she makes sure we stop at a grocery store and get a bouquet of flowers, and she just hands people flowers. Making art on sidewalks together, music and dance. So playing music, so much fun doing dance walks, y'all, especially at night with boom boxes and glow sticks or no, just getting the body out, especially at night because people don't feel, as weird. And so they can kind of let go a little bit. And then you transition in the daytime, bringing fold up chairs, climbing trees, hills, walls, things like that. So lots of stuff in here, lots of invitations, but it's just, hopefully that just gives you a little bit of a picture of just how much, how passionate I am about moving the way we're made to move. And this, I think there's so much that I always like to expand connection to moving in this way, and just your comment too, and not to point, not to center it or put you on the spot, but just I don't like walking, it's real. And so what I love about just the different practices, one of the things I always encourage is it doesn't need to be walking for transportation, at least right away. It doesn't need to be long walking. I often will host events where we're slowly, I have a dear friend who's calls himself a tree shaman. And he writes a story in here in the chapter, Walking is Earth Care. And his practice is to just slowly move around a tree. The first time really close to it, touching it. The second time, doing a loop around the tree a little bit further, and then a little bit further, and just noticing the tree. He does it primarily for, all this energy that we get from trees. If you've ever read books that focus on the chemicals trees send us, have you read like The Hidden Life of Trees, Secret Life of Trees? Anyway, so slow movement with trees and with flowing water, if it's not transportation, because it can feel like a grind, especially in places that aren't safe. So even if it's just slow movement right outside the front door, it does wonders. Yeah. Anyway, I have some books if you want some. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening.
Can we do some questions and answers?
Please, yeah. Yeah.
This looks like it's from a web page,
Oh,
but there's no link on here to the page,
okay. Yeah, it's so Intrinsic Paths is the name of the website.
intrinsicpaths.org.
.com. Yeah. And I have cards with me too, so I'll hand some out too.
And Fred, I can email you that document with the active links in it for all of those events. And Jonathan, maybe you want to just talk about all of the different things you're doing over the next few days?
Yeah, so there's going to be another book reading tomorrow at Majors and Quinn. We're going to do a connection walk right next to the lake before at 5:30. That'll be like 40 minutes.
Which lake?
Bade Makaska, am I saying that right?
Close.
Bade Makaska. I think I got that right. I've been working on it several years.
Well, I got that really.
Toilet, the bird, and the dance.
Yes. Good.
It's Bade Makaska.
Bade Makaska. Okay. So the walk is going to be just along there and then back to the neighborhood. It will be a simple connection walk. And then Saturday, we're going to do with a dear friend who's an organizer here in Minneapolis, Julia. I don't know if you all know Julia Curran. Happify Design is kind of the name she goes by a lot on social media, but her and I have known each other for years, and we both flow in this walking artist framework, and we're co-hosting an event along Franklin related to mostly pedestrian dignity safety themes, but also the benefits. And we're going to have a couple other invitations along the way, but we've got about 25 people signed up for that, which is going to be great. And so please feel invited. 5.5 miles, or you can do a segment. And then there's a walking leader training that we're doing with AARP Minnesota in the afternoon. There's a couple spots left for that, just a couple. So if you see yourself wanting to host walking events, just reach out to me or Ian, and we can send you that sign up sheet. And then Sunday is a 10-mile walk up and back along the Mississippi River, more from a meditative, contemplative kind of pilgrim frame. We're going to just take our time, do some breathing with trees. My dear friend Al, those of you have heard of the Camino de Santiago, which is a pilgrim path across Spain. So we're connecting a lot of those themes for 10 miles on Sunday. And then I think that's it in terms of public. I'm going to do a little thing. I'm going to be a part of the pedestrian advisory committee meeting on Monday for Minneapolis, just planting some seeds around some of this stuff. So
Is there someplace we can see where all these things are happening?
I think the flyer has it, and then Ian will send out something, but it's also on my website too, Intrinsic Paths. The events are on there.
Have you heard of
Did you
forest
wanna-
bathing?
Oh, yeah. Love it. All of it. Yes.
Did you want to pass around a sheet so people could put their emails on it?
I think the easiest thing, I've sent this as a document to everybody in this room, I think. I will send it again tonight, and it has active links in it. So if you want to sign up for any of these events, and I don't know that sign up is absolutely essential for all of them. But the information will be there, and Friday night at Majors and Quinn, Saturday morning, Franklin Avenue, Saturday afternoon at the AARP office I think it's in St. Paul, isn't it? Just kind of pretty close to the line with Minneapolis, and then the Mississippi River Walk starting at Minnehaha Falls on Sunday morning.
Yes.
But I will send that. I'm not sure that I have your email addresses, but I'll make sure you get it, Joe. Got it. Yeah.
I'm a friend who lives on the Mississippi. be aware of the condition of the river.
Yeah, it's full, it's full.
It's like, I asked.
I have a friend who's on the river and he said it's not good, right?
Yeah,
Hi.
well, I was doing programming in lacrosse 2 days ago and, oh, yeah, totally covering all the paths. And so I asked my friend Elle if she'd gone out and scouted the route and she goes, no, I think I'm just gonna like, no, please go out and check it.
May not be around.
It's gonna be around.
And it's getting worse by the
I'm able to see the river, so.
You're going, that's the gorge, and so the walking paths are all on the block.
That's what she said. She said we should be,
As long as you're gonna stay paved.
right, so I think we're okay.
Yeah, the lower half, the lower.
I haven't been to the whole area, so,
Upstream from Rankin.
yeah, I think they actually have it closed, that's what she said, so she's been sending me scouting notes today, like, oh, okay, yes, this is closed.
Yeah.
Right.
I have walked on sidewalks around like Lake of the Isles in knee deep water. Fish swimming around. And of course,
Yes,
so when you travel around, do people set up little hubs in their communities to kind of build from what you're sharing?
yeah, oh, yeah, so that's probably part of what we're really, what's a continuation of Walk to Connect. So, when I finished the cross-country walk, that was 2010, the thing that was the loudest for me was what would happen moving with other people. All these different stories, and I always describe it, it seems so basic, but being alongside of each other physically, moving our bodies forward. And not as easily being able to objectify when we sit across a table or a screen. And so like to have this movement while you're getting to learn about somebody, while you're building new neural pathways, while you're shedding stuff that's not helpful, let's just do that. It seems so basic. But as a strategy, as an intention, as a practice, as a framework, so that's where Walk to Connect came from. It was just experimenting with taking groups, and then we started what we would call chapters for many years. So we partner with public health and cities and states and foundations and refugee groups, and we do a lot of cross-cultural, cross-language. We do protesting, we do all kinds of things. But now that it's with America Walks, it's gonna, I think, just expand even more because of that relationship. So yeah. And we're calling it more like programs and not chapters anymore, but we're figuring it out as we go. Yeah,
You've walked a lot, obviously.
yes.
What do you notice about what are more walkable versus less walkable cities?
Yeah, I've been horrible at repeating the questions. I'm sorry, tech friends. I don't know, so let me repeat the question just in case you didn't hear it. Just what have I noticed in terms of more or less walkable cities? And so my answer always to that is filtering and discerning the arterial roads. Because the urban cores, meaning the downtown core, the roads that are in the downtown, a lot of people will default to the areas that are right downtown. But I'm always like, how are the arterial roads, kind of like Lake out here, right? How are the roads that are dotted with public housing, mixed income housing, have the most frequent bus routes, have grocery stores, libraries, have schools, have hospitals and clinics that are dotted with a lot of behavior that's often outside of a car. How are those roads? How is the city taking care of their arterials? And I haven't seen very many that are rather positive. Boulder, Colorado, I live in Denver. Boulder has a really great regional system, and they have a really progressive transportation community but they also have a lot of resources and a lot of money, but there's some amazing, really nice, long, trustworthy arterial paths that you can have a detached sidewalk, which is off from the road with trees, bus shelters at every bus stop, with good, like a protected bike lane that's not just paint. So you're separate from the car traffic. There's a lot of distance from it. So you have all of that in a space for from where you leave mostly to your destination. It's not all over Boulder, but they have some really good examples. Fort Collins has some good examples in Denver.
Well, they're consistently ranked among the best in the country, right?
Yeah.
Minneapolis is pretty, we lived in the South for a long time, and the South is terrible.
Oh, the South is rough. And there are some spots in DC. There are some spots in Portland, but they're only spots. This is where a lot of the invitation is. The pedestrian experience is privatized mostly. So it's up to the property owner, right? Mostly like half block by half block. It just changes. You know, and it's different here. I know it's different here in Minnesota than other states, but a lot of the DOTs, I mean, you could speak so much to this. You are the expert in the room, but it's because you're in the system. But so much of it is, it's just layers and layers of, you have like engineering manuals that are so, that literally don't legitimize pedestrian as a form of transportation. So a lot of DOTs won't have pedestrian infrastructure as like a line item. That's a huge issue, especially when the state highways are dotted with public housing and the most frequent bus routes. So the equity, the disconnect is loud. And what often happens is engineers and people who are building this up, they're trained a certain way. So it's not, you know, that's why I'm always saying this is not engineer shaming, this is not car shaming, but the work of having events where you can bring people out and show them. One of the stories in here in this in chapter 3, I was taking some CDOT Colorado DOT folks out on some of these roads, and they had some things to do midway, and they're like, well, we're just going to be here for the first half, and then they ended up canceling because they were learning so much within the first half of the walk. And then by the end, one of the directors in the department, she literally said to me, she said, this is really hard for me to say, but I need you to hear it. Like for 20 years, I've had an intellectual relationship to transportation. And it was just that, like, you know, it's those light bulb moments where it's like the people who are designing roads or making big decisions are not walking them, are not taking the bus on them. And so how can we invite, it's a long answer to your question, but it's, I agree, and so we have so much, in my opinion, to not just add sidewalks on the occasional side street or when the new development goes in, but to systemically commit to the dignity of people who walk, but also all of us that would mentally, socially, emotionally, environmentally, communally benefit from having those things, everything we've already said. Yeah.
Well, you just kind of touched on it. I was wondering how much you've worked with communities, and there tend to be suburban communities, but like here in the Twin Cities, the inner ring suburbs, especially where the housing isn't so far apart, but trying to convince people. The plan, we have some progressive planning departments,
Totally.
but don't want sidewalks. They live in houses and neighborhoods, and it's like, I don't want strangers walking by my house or whatever. I mean, so have you worked with communities or done any work around that issue?
Oh, all the time. And that's where the different approaches around just having public walking events that are maybe not focused on that theme, but are byproducts of another invitation. So having leaders that are doing like walks around health, or let's connect, let's move our bodies, let's connect to each other, and intentionally inviting certain neighborhoods to those events. We've experimented a lot, everything from like, don't be intentional at all to being very intentional, and then having say, let's move with some of this tension, if you're willing. And we can kind of have, and then very intentionally inviting residents who live this every day, who don't have the choice to drive, to participate and to share their stories, and to have funding available to pay them for a lot of their time to share their story, and to be co-create events where the resident stories are leading from the vantage point of I don't have a choice. I need to get to this bus. I need to walk through this area. I'm the one that uses the road that you don't want to have a sidewalk on. My grandmother uses the road. My grandmother waits at this bus stop. So it's like having that relational connection often we'll see the kind of, I had no idea. But getting people to show up to those events, work in progress. but it's we're experimenting with that all the time.
So it sounds like the best way to convince people intellectually is not intellectually, but to give them the experience.
That has been, I don't want to discount intellectual frameworks and that's not, but I feel, I've seen so much change within an hour from people who, like even in Appleton, Wisconsin, we had an event in Appleton with engineers and a couple elected people, and then we had a couple planners and the downtown Appleton folks. And we did a walk that was focused on a new plan that's going in on the north side of Appleton. And there's a transit center. Has anybody been to Appleton, Wisconsin? In here? Okay.
My sister lives there,
Oh,
so
right.
I go there several times
So
a
you,
year.
okay, so you have contacts. So just College Avenue is the main thoroughfare. There's the college right there downtown. They're doing a new plan on the north end. There's senior housing, there's public housing a little further out, and there's transit routes that kind of go, but there's a transit station right near downtown, but it's on the north side of town. Or I'm sorry, it's just a couple blocks north of their main thoroughfare. So there's a transit station where all the bus routes go. And so we're just 2 blocks. So their goal is to connect people and help people make it safer and to go. We want more people to feel safe coming into college. The transit center is on our list. We got to do some things, but it wasn't a primary focus, which, you know, with me leading, it became a primary focus. I added that, bumped it up on the list. But we're moving through, we're crossing by the transit station and we cross there like a busier, maybe I call it like a tier 2 arterial. It's not like the loudest one, but there's a lot of traffic. It's a bus route. It's a smaller arterial called Franklin. It's going just on the other side of the transit center. So many people are crossing the street from the school, from the senior center, from other areas to get to this transit center to catch the buses that only run once an hour. And 3 years ago, the engineers, because I stopped everybody at the intersection because there was no stop sign or stop light at that intersection. Cars are just kind of going right by and they have freedom to kind of fly by. And then people who are trying to catch that bus or who are getting off the bus are just waiting, kind of darting, you know, and you can imagine at night, you can imagine there's not great lighting. And the engineers in our stop were justifying it, saying because they did traffic counts, so they did pedestrian counts, and they weren't high enough to justify maintaining the stop, so they pulled out the stop. Right, so 3 years ago, and these are engineers who were leaning in to this conversation, who were taking a step amongst their peers to say, all right, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna see what this weirdo has to say. This loud, long-haired, whoever you are, but like, and so it was a real important moment to like ground it, affirm them for being there, but also call it out, like call out the heart. It's like, then your model for measuring is off because of like the people we're actively experiencing as they are there with us. You can see they're taking notes because in their body, they are witnessing people who are feeling unsafe at that intersection trying to get to the station. So you can see people like not feeling like they can cross. We just had someone earlier share about how a lot of the students who are monolingual Espanol speakers that don't feel safe getting to and from the transit station. And so we just had heard that story from a mother. So all this stuff was building up. So fast forward, I didn't know what they were writing or what they were feeling at the time, but fast forward, they were only supposed to be there for the first half of the event, but then they canceled their afternoon plans and stayed for the second half. And then at the end, they said, one of them in particular was just very clear, like that was an aha moment for me. To be on the intersection and to witness these individuals, like to visibly feel and witness their stress as they were trying to catch the bus, knowing that it's only once an hour. Like the value of their lived reality has, like, how does that go up instead of just one count for a pedestrian? So you felt all those things, and they said they were really grateful to be called out. They didn't like it. They were grateful, which was a good art.
Yeah.
But that was a 35-minute walk. So I've seen a lot of it really turn some corners quickly through when the environment is speaking for itself. And with engineers, their primary their primary principle is safety. It really is safety. It's what keeps them, that's their guiding star. And so it's been really good to have them out.
So you help those engineers realize that these people were not just numbers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
So you've done the walk across the country, what's kind of on the horizon, what's the next, larger thing that you're thinking about?
Yeah, this question was, what's next on the horizon, after the cross-country walk? So I've continued to do long. I need it, it's medicine, I have so many different routes. When the book came out, I just decided to do a 2-week walk from Providence to New York City. Had a lot of book events along that, which was really great. My partner, who is a nurse, he likes to do long walks, but not like I do. And so we've had a journey to figure out how we coexist. Because I just want to be out. But we came to a really good place. So to your question, July 1st, we're going to do a 2-month walk on the Oregon and Washington coast. So from Florence, Oregon, all the way up to Vancouver. And I'll be writing and doing some book stuff and hosting some events, but it's going to be, I can't wait. And it's mostly going to be side roads going through towns and documenting stuff, but yeah.
Okay, Alex, can you explain what you and Ian are gonna be doing?
That's right, you all got it.
Well, we're doing a thing called the Great Saunter. Our daughter lives in Brooklyn and she's invited us out to do this organized annual walk, which is to do the perimeter of Manhattan Islands, which is normally 32 miles, but this year they said there's construction, so it's just a few miles longer. You're supposed to do it in 12 hours. So we've been doing some long walks and training. One shot. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
With your dog sometimes.
Yeah, but he's not going to.
Right.
For these longer walks, what do you like to have? What do you feel is the comfortable average per day in terms of money?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it just, for me, it depends on, I have some foot stuff that comes up. I have things, so it depends on my body a lot. I try and leave it pretty flex and open, but for me, average, it can be easily like 12 to 18 is like a good, but that's me like going all day. I'm documenting for pedestrian dignity. I'm writing, I'm doing work. I'm stopping at libraries and coffee houses. It's like, it's a full thing.
It sounds like National Geographic should be doing a story on you.
Oh my gosh, I would so love to be like a journalist for that. I find a path where I could be supported to write stories on what I know it's out there. Yeah.
You ever tried to reenact historic routes?
Yes.
Because as a child, I lived on 20, all in Massachusetts. And my father would tell me, this is the road that General Knox with the oxen brought the cannons to Boston to get the British to leave.
Wow. Yeah,
So that grounded me right there.
absolutely. No, I love those kinds of paths. And there were several, and intentionally shaping my route at times for even if it was just a couple days to follow certain parts of the Spanish Trail. To follow parts of the Pony Express, like some specific, because I would talk to locals all the time about where should I go? What would you suggest? I'm trying to get to roughly this town. So the cross-country walk was very intentionally like, I have these rough benchmarks. Get dropped off on the Delaware coast. All right, I want to get to DC. I want to get to Cincinnati, and just really depending on local people to guide. But even like here, like every time I come to a new, cause I've only been to Minneapolis once when I was doing the America Walks conference several years ago. But like, I am always like scanning maps, like, oh God, what could I think it was yesterday or a couple days ago, I was thinking about for today, where can I get? Can I get as far as, this village or town? It's about 13 miles away. What's the transit like back? I'm just always thinking about these 10, 12, 15 mile stories that are just right wherever I am. Such an amazing way to see it. If, you know, you feel, I always tell people too, if you don't feel safe doing some of these things, or if it feels really like having backup plans for the first couple times, like having someone join you or having someone know where you're going and then pick you up at the end, have someone check on you, like have some, you know, some backup routes. One of the people who I'm doing an event, there's a smaller event on Sunday evening at St. Jane's House. I forgot to mention that. So we're doing a little book reading at St. Jane's House, if you're familiar with where that is, on Sunday this week. But the person who's helping to organize that was at one of our walks many years ago and took it to heart for real and just replaced. He just said, all right, I'm not going to drive for 2 weeks. And all of his practical trips were on foot. And then one of those trips was to the airport and he walked, did the whole thing, you know, and it was like a 14, 15 mile journey for him. And he learned so much and he just committed to that, like to that practice for 2 weeks. And his reflections were amazing. He sent me this long, you know, like, oh my God, we had no idea. This was so awful, but important. You know, like it was not all positive, but it was really informative for him.
You talked a little bit about how your perspective about cars, but I'm a bicyclist. What's your perspective on bicycles?
Yeah, I'm grateful you asked that. He was asking, what's your perspective on bicycles? I kind of have it, I personally love to ride a bike. So I have a very simple bike that I get around on. And so I have my own experiences with how unsafe and disconnected biking can feel, especially with so many paths that don't have dignified protection. But I kind of hold it in two camps, like, and I'm just speaking specifically from the advocacy side of things, but like in one side, I just find that it's like an unquestionable, we're working together. We're working together like I use the term decenter cars. It's not about getting rid of them. It's just decentering them. As just a way to keep it like spacious and not this or that binary, but like to decenter the car. What does that look like? And so in all of my postings, I'm always using emojis. This is TikTok, Instagram, but I'm like making sure that there's little visuals of walkers, wheelchair users, bikers, skateboarders, and bus riders kind of in all my posts to share that we're doing this work together around systems change. And then I would say the other side of that is, I think really trying to be a very nuanced, particular voice for the details of the pedestrian moving on foot or on a wheelchair, because so often funding, state, city, regional, national, can have mobile, like active transportation under its umbrella, multimodal transportation in terms of planners that get hired for states or cities. And because we have so many more bike advocates, the funding that can often, but so it's not a versus, but it's like we're very intentional about the unique particular nuances of the human body moving from A to B. And so there is a lot of delineation, and I think needed delineation from the biking perspective, because there's so much. And I think it's largely underrepresented in active transportation spaces. I think it too often gets lumped in bike. And I just think it needs to be, we got to work together and we got to honor the uniqueness of each. And how do we do that? But it's good to see more towns and agencies like hiring specific bike planners and specific pet planners. It's happening, not fast enough, but.
Well, maybe Biden could start a new U.S. department for walkers.
I'm telling you. I mean, yep. So to the point, I can just like talk about a hot mess moment I had. So September, my partner and I lived in Ireland for a year. I love Ireland. Part of my family history is from Donegal. And so we went back to Ireland. I was hosting some events, and I had a book talk at this conference called Walk 21, which was an international conference focused on pedestrian advocacy from global perspectives. It was great. It was in Dublin. So there's people organizing from all over the world coming together around this, and I'm sitting up in the stands listening to Scotland give a presentation. And Scotland has exactly what you just said. They had 7 staff members up on stage who are fully paid by the Scottish government. And their main focus, for this project specifically, their main focus is to train volunteer walking leaders. And then one of those seven staff members, their main job is to bridge the 8,700 volunteer walking leaders. To bridge those leaders into pedestrian advocacy and climate justice and sustainability. Paid by the government, benefits. How many? 7. Just focused on that. I hope we could get even close to something like that. I mean, you obviously have the planners and engineers who are working on that, but when you mobilize and you base build at that level, recognizing not just from a mobility perspective, but a mental health perspective and an environmental ecological perspective. I walk and I notice the watersheds. You were talking about watersheds. One of the stories in here, I've done a lot of work with mixed indigenous communities in New Mexico and southern Colorado, and we have had this incredible youth walking leader program focused on taking groups out to follow watersheds, to learn what are called acequias in New Mexico and southern Colorado, to learn about the water and to learn about where it starts and what's polluting it and the story of water. And these young people are paid to lead these walks. Anyway, there's just so much room for it to become a more government supported. Now you're giving me rant. You're giving me rant. Thank you. Well, I don't want to keep you all night. So just thanks for your questions and for being here and listening and for your trust. Thank you, Ian, for hosting, brother.
Jonathan, are you up for maybe a little more just informal conversation up in the living room? So thanks so much, everybody, for coming. If you want to chat a little more, we'll set up in the living room.
And if you, the books they're $20 if you want one. I've got Venmo. I put a little pen and ink art piece with each of the books, and cash is fine too if you want one. No worries. Yeah.